So we begin. This is what happens if you give people too much freedom. Silence. Okay. I've got about 20 minutes, so shall I begin?
Yes.
And I have 3 videos, and I'd like to natter each side of the videos, if I may. But we've talked and listened a lot over the last few days about this idea of cultural intervention really as some kind of political action. And really at the heart of this is a very, very old pair of concepts, I think. So without turning this into a history lesson, let me suggest that if I'm right, and we have a Greek here who will test me, the root of the word theatre is to see again.
Oh, yeah.
And the word again is important in this, because really as human beings we're stuck, aren't we, in the monotony of our own existence. We can't escape in time or place or action. We are here today. We can't be anywhere else at the same time. Only one thing allows us to be somewhere else or to see things through other prisms, and that's the arts, in particular, from my perspective, theatre and performance. Theatre, to see again, is for me absolutely basic in this. And the other thing is that when you again go back to the Greeks, but right through to present day time, the role of the clown and the role of the vice figure in medieval theatre as someone who disrupts present day reality and creates in that corruption, a moment to rethink is absolutely essential. And that's why I rather like this idea of hacking that we've been talked about for a long time, because hacking is something that can only happen for a second or two before the power structures get hold of it and tame it again. But let me just show you, let's see how quickly we can hack our own reality right now. Those of you who are wearing glasses, could you take them off? And could you give them to the person next to you? Yeah. And could you put them on, please? And could the rest of you, or all of you, take your mobiles out of your pockets? Come on, come on. Have you got mobiles? Don't tell me you haven't got mobiles. I don't believe you. And give them to the person behind you. Yeah. And the person behind you, could you scroll through and look at the 5th email on that person's email? Yeah. Yeah, now you don't feel so comfortable, do you? It can be that easy. We can start breaking this feeling of comfortableness pretty quickly. Okay, so has anyone read the 5th email yet? Is there anything you want to share with the rest of us? Because we can get these microphones moving faster than you can imagine. So, really, I think it's that simple. The art of the artist, the job of the artist is to provoke, to break, but to do it through one very simple thing that perhaps we haven't talked enough about over the last day or two, which is beauty and irresistibility. People have got to be irresistibly attracted to what we do. And if that doesn't happen, then I think we're heading too much towards social work and political action in its more pure sense. And I don't think culture really has too much of a role in that. We've got to always be very playful and questioning authority wherever it comes from, even our own authority. Particularly our own authority. We live in liquid times, to quote Zygmunt Bauman. Everything's moving, everything's shifting, and this creates huge potential for us and huge dangers. As someone mentioned, the US elections this morning, whatever happens, whatever the result, there's a huge danger. I have a mother who voted for Brexit. I have 2 children who are the result of a non-Brexit ideology. Their mum's Spanish, and they went to Basque-speaking universities. And one of my daughters said, "What now?" on Facebook, totally distraught about what does that mean to be part of a bigger family. And of course, but there's another side of me that says, as a European, Well, Brexit has something positive, which is someone needed to give this neoliberal adventure that people are doing in our name a good kicking. So isn't it a pity that it comes from the popularist hard right? But there we are. My work is to do with creating the potential for us to allow us to imagine utopic spaces. It's that simple, and wherever I get a permission or a chance to do it in an open space, I'll go there, whether it's something structured by the state, or if it's structured by an NGO, or even if it's structured in the village where I live, in a mountain top in Spain. I don't expect these spaces to be open very long. As I said before, I think the minute that people realize the potential power that you're unleashing amongst a group of people, it will probably be closed down. Let's see the first video. I hope it's only about a minute long. There's no sound. Where's the sound? That's not the sound.
Which we're going to call cultural bartering. So the idea is that if somebody has a skill or a tool or an ability to resolve a problem that another group needs, then perhaps they can swap. Perhaps someone in one group is a trombonist, but in another group there's a choreographer, and they need each other's help. That's on a very simple level. But we can also create chains of bartering, just like in an economy where money is the transactory tool. So with chain bartering, I may give you my trombone skills, but you may give somebody else your dance skills, who in turns give me back their carpentry skills. So we're trying to create a cultural economy which doesn't involve money, which involves all the things that are more important. Money is just one way of transferring energy from one group to another. But we are trying to remember and rehearse the idea that energy can be transmitted and made to help through other ways as well.
Okay, so this is a project called Moste, Bridge Builders, which was the first of 4 that I've helped implement for the European Capital of Culture in Wroclaw. Wroclaw, until 1945, had a completely different identity, a completely different language, different religion. It was called Breslau. And when I told my mum I was going to work in Poland for 4 years in a city called Wroclaw, she said, I've never heard of it. And I said, have you heard of Breslau? And she said, oh, of course, but that doesn't exist anymore. In 1945, it left the imaginations of Western Europeans, at least. There was the biggest ethnic cleansing in Europe ever in that region. 3.5 million Germans were forced out, and 3 million Poles, let's say, forced in. They were not really given much choice, from the east, from an area of Poland that became Ukraine. So if you meet anyone of my age, 53, 54, no one of my age parents were born there. I'm the oldest of the generation from Wroclaw. And this means that there was, and this is the interesting thing from an artistic point of view, an absolute trauma, because the most dangerous question you could ask in the 50s and 60s in Wroclaw was, where am I from? Because that would be placing into doubt the whole Stalinist reorganization of Eastern Europe after the war, where multicultural societies were destroyed and replaced by ethnically pure ones. Poland, until today, is 98% ethnically Polish, when before the war it would have been 30-30-30, something like this, as many other countries, Ukraine, etc., in that area was. So what Hitler started, Stalin really finished very, very clearly. I met an 87-year-old man who had, at the age of 6, asked that question and had been sent to Siberia with his family the next day, and returned 18 years later without them. So this concept of trauma still exists to this day. I'm very interested in not just working with people and enabling them to reflect through culture their stories, identities, and gaining some civic understanding of how the structures around them can be made more democratic and more available to their needs. I'm also very interested, and this is where the big contradiction is in my work, and I heard people say this morning, what's your great failures? Well, mine's absolutely teeming with them every single day. I have this fascination of working in a very big scale because I'm sick and tired of watching governments and states and Europe and FIFA and all of these people having these huge stadiums with huge amounts of people and controlling our public space. In ancient Greek times, we met in these big theatres to discuss democracy. Now we have these huge events full of corporate images. And I insist, I won't let it go. I want voices, ordinary voices, to be pushed back in there. So let me show you, what you've just seen was a project that was called Moste. I invited artists under the age of 30 to apply for money and then have a year to prepare a work of art to be performed on a bridge in Wroclaw. All of the 27 events happened on the same day. We created total chaos in the city with the help of the city council. They were incredibly brave, the city council, to help us do it. But we activated, as a result, 2,000-ish people who had never seen themselves really as cultural activists or artists before. 2,000 people who have come through the next 2 years with us, building the next ever bigger project. I'm going to show you the next video. It's a little bit longer. This is an excerpt from a documentary about the preparations for the opening ceremony. And I want you to see it. It's interesting because it shows how big citizen-led rehearsals can nevertheless be created into something that creates spectacle worthy of European television coverage. Let's see what we've got. Often 2,000 people rehearsing in this space every day for 4 months. I'm feeling wonderful because every time I come into rehearsal, more and more and more is happening without me being there. And that's a great sign because on the last day, 17th of January 2016, I need to be the only person who's not working. Okay, I'm not going to show you the big show that happened in the middle of the square. It's online if you want to see it. How does a city manage this kind of thing? Well, actually, Wroclaw were both very conservative and incredibly brave at the same time. Very conservative because no government authority wants to give up control. They want to look for the safe option. They must, by political definition, aim for success. And this work is predicated on dialogue, conversation, and then managing chaos. And so you have to be absolutely committed to creating something that people are never going to have to apologize for. At the same time, create space where people have honest, real, transformatory conversations that can affect the whole shape and style of the piece. And that means that, for example, the piece you've just seen, 4 processions came in from 7 kilometers from the city center, 4 different corners of the city, over a period of 3 hours. Each route had about 15 stops along it, where events happened, all designed and created as a result of the people wanting to just tell their stories of the history of the 20th century, their arrival, other people's arrivals, the times of communism along each of those routes, and then a huge event at the middle. So we were able to, I think, achieve both, but the investment and the commitment, both from the whole team and the process of learning, absolutely radical. And particularly, I must say, the politicians, because any politician, especially, I must say, politicians that come from a tradition of Eastern European countries where civic society, isn't it interesting that in communist countries, the communists actually destroyed civic society and social democratic tendencies in a way that was not really, didn't happen in Western capitalist countries. So even till today, you see a huge distrust between state organs and civic society in countries like Poland, Bulgaria, Hungary, etc., etc. So these kind of projects and the contradictions that they maintain within them are particularly interesting in this context. You cannot tell the story, and the idea was that Wroclaw, the people of Wroclaw, the citizens of Wroclaw, tell the story of their city to Poland, to Europe, to the world. That's what the phrase we've been working on for 3 years now. What you just saw had 2,000 performers, all of them mainly citizens. There were some professionals in there, acrobats, for example. We were expecting about 5,000 or 10,000 people maximum. 5. All the budgets were worked out on. 5,000 people following each route. So 20,000 people, and then maybe another 10,000 in the main square to watch the opening ceremony. We had 50,000 people on each route. We were overwhelmed. Talk about failure. A lot of people couldn't see. But 200,000 people turned out to see this event. And the lesson I walked away with, and a lesson that a lot of the politicians walked away with, is there is a hunger for people to tell their own stories and be involved in an implicit, explicit level in the making of culture. The old systems do not respond. Cultural institutions who provide products to the end user, no more. And of course, this means, I don't know whether it will happen in Wroclaw and other cities, but it means radical rethinking if we're going to pick up on the energy that this released. You cannot tell the story of Wroclaw. The people of Wroclaw said, we cannot tell the story of Wroclaw unless you include the diasporas involved. Where's the German voice? The voice that has been hidden since 1945. Where's the Jewish voice? Where's the Ukrainian voice? Where's the Czech voice? So this led us to the third project. It was called Flow. It happened this June. We had 180,000 people come to see it. There were 5 million for the opening ceremony online watching, and a similar number, a little bit less for Flow watching it. And Flow started from a very intimate conversation between me and 4 young composers under the 30 years old from Israel, Wroclaw, Poland, Germany, and the Czech Republic. Over a period of a year, they wrote a symphony about their work, and this is what there's no television screen, there's no number going down. So let's just see 1 minute of this, and then I'll stop. An orchestra of 500 people on an island in the middle of Wroclaw, playing the piece written by these 4 young composers. And we created a multimedia experience using all the buildings around the river and 55 boats on the water to tell the story of the destruction of Breslau in 1945 and the rebirth of Wroclaw as a Polish city.
Capital of Culture 2016. Oglądają Państwo
And the essential message in this is that
W historii Wrocławia flow i
Wrocław can only be understood as a European city, not as a Polish city.
z Europejskiej Stolicy Kultury Wrocław 2016. Po całkowitym zniszczeniu melodii
And as you can hear, traditional Yiddish music has been integrated into this.
Spielman odwołuje się do
How this piece plays out in a city where in the same year effigies of Jews have been burnt in the main square becomes a very, very interesting cultural dichotomy to explore. Okay, let's stop. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Is there any light?
No, but there's a timer.
There is a timer. Hello, is it my turn now?
Yes, please.
So I'm Amanda Mogensen from Mejeriet in Lund. And before I start, I want to tell you that, I'm here because I want to change the society. And I want to know if you are with me. So how many of you want to change our common society? Raise. Stand up! Okay, very good. Thank you. There is a force in culture which is political, a power both in the actual creation but also in the common experience of cultural expressions. And it's in this power that politics, so to say, is linked to culture. I become a human being in the context which I find myself, and so do you. And that is, I think, the foundation of our citizenship and the participation in the society. And this became very obvious for me when I was in the election campaign 2 years ago. I was in charge of the Feministiskt Initiativs campaign. And since you know, it's a new party and we didn't have any money at all. So the only thing we had was the commitment of people and their willingness to change the society. So we built the strategy for this campaign. Our campaign was to use the commitment. And it became like an improvisationsteater, a very large one. Very often this commitment was manifested in cultural expressions, like movies, pictures, music, poems, jewelry, clothes, well, a lot of things. And I brought that with me now at my work at Mejeriet, this force that in culture, which is political. And I have been taking part in gathering the cultural actors in Lund to formulate why it's important with culture and what we want the politicians to do to strengthen the cultural life in Lund. So it's this question again. We together, we formulated why is it important that we exist? Because that's the reason for the politicians to make the opportunities for us to work. So we are 13 local cultural actors and even more individuals, I think like 30 or 35, that together in consensus formulate minsta gemensamma nämnaren, well, the things that we can agree on, and why the value of culture and what we want the politicians to do. And we also made a debate between the politicians in Lund about what they want to do to strengthen the cultural life in Lund. And we are no organization. We still represent ourselves and our organization. And I think that is what makes us both credible and strong. And for me, that is leadership, as the responsibility to tell the politicians why they have to strengthen the free cultural life. If we don't do it, who will do it? So, as a representative of culture, I have the responsibility to influence the public policy and to provide good conditions for a free cultural life. And that applies both to explain why culture is important, to give it higher status in higher political status and priority on the political agenda. And it also and I also have the responsibility to provide concrete proposals that on which what policy measures that the politicians can implement to strengthen the culture actors and improve our opportunities to create, so that even more people can take part of and experience culture. And that is what drives me in my job as a leader for Mejeriet, the culture center Mejeriet. I'm neither an artist or a culture creator, but as a leader of this culture center, I see myself as a warrior of culture, with the mission to strengthen the role of culture and give more space in society, because that is necessary for the democracy to function. And by that I mean democracy which all people are equally respected and included. We have been talking about this yesterday and today too, that there is a clear link between nationalism that we now see spreading in Sweden and Europe and United States and everywhere, and the restrictions of the free cultural life. But at the opposite is also true, that together with and by cultural creativity, and the force given by shared cultural experience, we can change the society. The freedom of culture is the foundation of a real democracy, vital democracy, vital democracy. Culture has a value in itself, but it also have a very important function for the society. So I think it's important for all free culture actors and all we people that are working with culture. It's very important that we take on the leadership and also the responsibility to tell the politicians, the elected ones, that the elected power, that what to do and why it's important that we exist. We have the knowledge, and we also have the power to give them the answer to what they need to do to strengthen democracy. So that was what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Hi. I'm Elli Papakonstantinou. I'm an artist, and I'm also running a theater space called Vyrsodepseio. It's a grassroots project. Is a member of the Trans-Europal network. So can we run the video, please? So I'm Greek, and I'm quite schizophrenic. So I will be running this. I'm doing this as an experiment, but don't put the lights down, please. So I will be running a video of several works that we have been, I have directed and we've been producing in this space called Vyrsodepseio. And at the same time, I'll try to walk you through my objections and some contradictions that I see regarding audience development and so on. So can you see, or this is, shall we put the lights down? It's fine. Okay, cool. So I will start by making 2 points. First of all, that the problem is already in the title, audience development. Audience is a neutral and unifying word, and is connected to the word consumer and to consumerism. To me, when I think about audience, I would rather use the word citizens development. It's important to think of a new wording that implies much more controversy, controversial entities that come to receive a cultural project. Then I believe that words have their own strength in nourishing our understanding of the world and of human relations, and that it is important to look for diversity. My second relevant point is that, to my understanding, audience development is irrelevant. It means, in fact, it means nothing to Greece. And I will explain. But to do this, I would kindly ask you to close your eyes for a second, take a deep breath. It's all right, you're not going to miss the images. We're getting back. So take a deep breath, empty your brain. We've talked about a lot of things today. And when you open your eyes again, in your own time, I want you to dream of yourselves in this very space. So open your eyes in your own time, in your pace. And imagine of yourself in this conference space. We're still here, we're all together. You're part of one of us. But something has changed. Around you, there are riots, 90% unemployment in cultural sector. Electricity just went off and on. Funding, there is no more funding in the arts, no more funding. It has been like that for 5 years. No funding whatsoever. And most importantly, people are out in the streets. Everybody's in the streets. People, citizens, are claiming back their lives. They're claiming back their rights that they had fought for decades. And by doing so, they're claiming back their culture. So let's say that we wake up in this situation and that we can actually imagine this situation. What would be the first question to ask among ourselves? That's a real question to you. Please feel free to say what question comes in mind first. So we wake up in this situation. What do you ask for? Would it be where? Would it be why? Would it be what? What are you asking for? What shall I do exactly? So I'm getting back to this point. I don't know who said that, but thank you. So this is the major question for me. What shall I do? And I wanted to make this distinction because I think that for where I come from, there is an emergency situation. And art, civilians and artists together, they have phrased this very question, and then the rest of the questions: why, where, what? Content is very important. We tend to forget about content, and I think that the Western societies, the Western cultures, are very much driven away from content, and I don't understand why. And we very much talk about how, and nice wording, audience development, I don't know what else to say. So I will just go very fastly, very quickly, through some of the things that happened in Greece these 5 years. So cultural makers and audiences joined forces. Okay, they reciprocally challenged the confrontational relationship between audience and artists. That was a priority. It was to treat cultural spaces as an extension of the public political sphere and dialogue, and to produce content-wise work that meets profound questions of the collective mind. That, by the way, politics comes from the Greek word politikos, which means of the citizens, for the citizens, relating to the citizens. So, I'm running out of time here, but let me just quickly say that we've reshaped the dramaturgy. We've been thinking a lot on co-authorship with the citizens. For example, I've directed a show, this particular show that you can see now, that is credited to 100 Athenians. And in fact, this kind of humility that some of the speakers was talking about, this is something that I have experienced while working with citizens that are not necessarily trained actors, but their identity of the citizen was like their prior identity. They were there on the same level as the professional artists, and they were all doing their best to answer the what question, what to do by doing art. All independent art in Greece today is sustained through ticketing. That means it is supported by the citizens. And at the same time, art is booming rather than shrinking. We had 1,000 different shows in 2016. I would like to think of Greece, that Greece is not an exotic experiment to you, and that we can deduce some useful conclusions out of this disaster that happened in my country, as I understand that there is a real problem all over Europe. By the way, catastrophe means a turning point, a shifting point. So we tend to think of it as a negative way, but in fact, it's releasing a lot of energy. And one of the things that happened when subsidies went out was that we were free to produce the kind of work that we wanted to produce without needing to fill in and tick in boxes, and to produce with whom we wanted to produce, and having the audience in the rooms without needing to go into techniques. They were there because of the main questions that we were all trying together to answer. And that's another thing that I would like also to make a point of, the importance of centralized politics in the art. What I mean by that, maybe I'm not phrasing it properly, but is to raise major questions like, are European citizens happy? Why? Because in arts, we tend to go for very focused questions. We tend to think of community work. Community work is very specialized. And we kind of forget the central platform, that is the public platform, that we share a lot in common. I think that There are a lot of people in Europe nowadays that, because of the fact that our society has changed very fastly, very quickly, and a lot of people have not yet had their stories told. Nobody wants to change, but changes happen. And I very much believe that we should find the means and the ways to include more narratives in this story, in this new European narrative, if I may say. So what is my risky conclusion, because I'm running out of time as well, is that we tend to think that those who lead art and culture are the NGOs or the institutions or the individual artists. But I have come to the conclusion that the main leader in culture is the citizen. Not the dull, neutralized consumer we have come to call the audience, but the active citizen, out of which active artists emerge. Art is a citizen's affair, and so is the city. And this is a simple reality we tend to forget. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I've been asked to say a couple of words about leadership in the independent, non-governmental culture sector that Amanda, Elli, and I work in. So I think that common to the leadership of Elli and Amanda, and I suppose many of you, is that for them, and you don't know that I'm going to say this, so it's kind of... Leadership is not about gaining a personal position, gaining more power or influence. For them, it is about being accountable and responsible for making the changes that they think are paramount, to act to realize the dream, the vision of a more inclusive and equal society. They take initiatives, they ask questions, uncomfortable questions, they take up place, they give others room, they pave space for others. They do not yell charge from the top of the hill. Instead, they ask who would like to come on to the journey and make sure that everybody are involved to decide the destination of the journey and how to get there. I call that participatory leadership. Through the way of acting and leading, they confirm leadership of others and encourage it. Participatory leadership improves the ability of the group and gives room for others to take the lead, supported by the group. So I wouldn't say that this type of leadership is specific for the so-called independent or non-governmental cultural sector. I find it just as often among public servants and in big cultural institutions. What I would like to point out is that in the independent cultural sector, this is a self-initiated, self-imposed leadership that doesn't come with an announced position, a big budget, and an already defined mission. Therefore, there is an incredible power, a grassroots feeling, and a freedom in the non-governmental cultural sector that has not really yet been unleashed to its full potential. And right now, I'm very interested in what happens in the intersection between the public sphere, the civil society, and the private sector. How can these sectors, these actors, with the support of the scientific community, cooperate for a sustainable development? How does participatory leadership look like in these intersections? And what can unleash it? In our sector, we sometimes put on what we call in Swedish offerkofta. It is a metaphor for putting on a grey. In my imagination, it's grey. I don't know what colors you have for the offerkofta. It's a grey, uncomfortable, sticky cardigan of feeling that you're the victim, you're being victimized. We say that no one understands us. No one really understands art outside of this room. And I think that Amanda's point about that we have a responsibility of articulating why culture is so important and making its impact and value understandable and clear as a key role of our leadership. And on the other hand, I think it is also of crucial importance to make things more complicated and more complex sometimes, because that in itself can be very important. The usual leadership theories and management systems derive from the business sector, and when they are written for the culture sector, they are intended for big cultural institutions with more than 200, even 1,000 people employed. The British researcher Sue Kay has in her thesis looked at how leadership happens in small cultural organizations in the UK with less than 10 people employed. And actually more than 80% of the cultural organizations in the UK are so small. Yet all literature and leadership training, more or less, is focused on leading major cultural institutions. And I would say that you can't really apply the same methods. I come in contact with a lot of cultural organizations in Europe who shy away from management models and leadership theories. They seek new ways to govern, to coexist and co-create. And we might say that they overcomplicate things, but they might say that they challenge our notions of leadership and organizations. I think I have brought a couple of slides. Let's see what happens if I click this one. No? Click there. We'll see if they come up. Otherwise, I'll be fine. And you can travel in your imagination with me to Naples, because that's where we go first. And it's the Center L'Asilo in Napoli, in Naples, Italy, who is a civic cultural initiative that has managed to change the law of governance in Italy bottom up and created precedents that has now inspired 7 new initiatives in Napoli. So L'Asilo is a group of people. They wouldn't like me to call them a group. They're not a collective, but I just say that now for simplicity. They're based in an old monastery in Naples. The monastery is owned by the municipality, and this group of people squatted it some years back. The municipality liked what they were doing there and asked them to form an association, an organization. But they refused to be organized in any kind of legal entity. Instead, they wrote a declaration on the public use of the monastery, where all citizens are welcome to participate. The declaration of the use of the commons for the public is the only now existing legal agreement between the municipality and L'Asilo. With this as a basis, the city of Napoli has now taken care of the maintenance of the building. They pay the electricity bill, they pay the water, and then it's all the rest up to the citizens to run the space. So they could have easily taken the route of, okay, we form an organization, we start to manage the space, and then you're getting into, okay, who's actually going to be here, who can rent, etc. But they chose the other way. They insisted on the openness of the space, to be public. They insisted that it's the city who should take that role, and we are going to organize ourselves just by declaring it's open, and we're going to run it, and anyone who wants to come is welcome. So it took them 3 years to negotiate this. But by doing that and insisting, they created a fundamental change that now has a rippling effect across Italy, and maybe international as well. I want to mention another center that I think take an interesting leadership role, and that is Stanica in western Slovakia, in the city of Žilina. When they started, they were just a bunch of teenagers who were quite bored in a small town. They found that one of the railway stations was abandoned and not in use. So they could persuade the Slovakian railway company that they could lease it for 20 years for, I think it was 25 euros a year. Like many other teenagers, they didn't have any money, but they asked people to volunteer to help them renovate the building. They asked companies to donate building material and to send their electricians for free for a day or two. A few years later, they needed a new theatre space, and they didn't have so much money. But they had been obviously drinking a lot of beer for many years, so they had many empty beer crates. They built the performance space using the beer crates, stray and clay, and it's now a professional theatre space. And then, in the cooperation with the Jewish community of Žilina, they started to renovate the old synagogue that was not in use into the first contemporary art hall in Slovakia. A group of young people take the initiative to create the first contemporary art hall in Slovakia. So not only did they do that, but they also managed to connect the city, the inhabitants, to the Jewish community and to the memory of what has happened there. The methodology is simple but effective. I'm running out of time here, so I need to skip things. They really show that actions speak louder than words, and they get people to come with them on the journey. I worked international since 1994, and I've seen big change in increasing interest for international cooperation in Sweden since then. And still I experience how easy it is to forget how relatively well our system of support for culture works in the Nordic countries, and how fragile our democracy is, how easy it is to forget. I will skip here a bit, but working as the Secretary General of Transeuropal, I come in contact and get these stories from all other parts of Europe. I get the calls when our member center in Donetsk in Ukraine are taken over by Russian separatists and public art is thrashed, etc. Not long ago, I got the question, what cultural organizations in Europe are most concerned about, except the obvious first one about the budget cuts. But to be honest, people in Spain, in Greece, in Slovenia, etc., they've lived with the big budget cuts for a long time, and that is not what keeps them awake at night. Instead, it's a matter of much graver concern, and that's what we've been talking about today, about the increasing nationalism, etc. I just want to share with you what my friend, a young culture operator in Budapest, told me last week. She said, Birgitta, it's like my entire country is in a mental fog, and in a fog, you can't see anything. There are no directions. You don't know where to go, so then you sit down and you wait, and you wait. And then where there's a voice in the fog telling you where to go, you get a feel of safety, and then you follow that voice. I think that many of us are quite confused about what to do now. But we all know that the rules of the game has changed, and we need to desperately change tactics. Thank you very much. And then we're up. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Birgitta, and the whole team here. I have to say that last phrase, I feel like my country is in a fog. I know that feeling. So that's a very interesting thought, but we're waiting for the voice in the dark. So we've got a few minutes. We have a few minutes for questions. So I've got, of course, I'm burning with my own selfish ones as usual, but can I invite all of you to anything that you would, any reflections, indeed, comments or questions that you would like to put to our team of campaigners here? Can I call you that? Is that all right? Can you be campaigners? Is that too strong a word? But no. Activists. Citizen activists, I think. So, yes. Somebody down there. Can we get a mic to that lady who's Actually, can we have the lights up at all? If that's possible.